Hey guys, we are
Hello.
back. How is everybody this week?
Doing fairly good. I had some off days this week with my MCAS, but
Oh yeah.
yeah, but I'm feeling pretty good today.
What about you, Carrie?
I'm doing great. I'm happy. I've got a bigger desk now.
Oh,
I've
nice.
been playing with technology and getting all my stuff set up, and
Carrie got
now
a
I've
new
got
desk.
room. That's
That's the
awesome.
Nice.
same. That's the same thing I did. I got me a new desk when it was around the time we started doing this, and it just makes all the difference in the world to have a nice space. And
True.
I was telling the ladies here that my son drew this picture behind us, so it's we're gonna leave it because we like art around here.
We do.
So we were just talking, Lynn and I and Carrie, about I've not really felt well lately, and I'm trying to figure out why. And so Lynn was trying to help me troubleshoot, and I said, "Well, we better go ahead and go live, um, because our people are expecting us."
Yeah, and I'm just based on, when you were making comments on the live stream from me yesterday when I was on Carnivorous Grandma, it sounds like it might be the rebounder because you said you've been doing more rebounding. And I think that's why I've had some off days this week because I found that it's really easy to kind of overdo it on the rebounder when you're not used to doing it, and it gets the
Mm-hmm.
lymphatic system flowing and starts like releasing toxins. And I know
I didn't even think about that.
I was kind of over. Well, it happened to me the first week that I got my rebounder because I was just it was having so much fun, and I was
Mm-hmm.
going a little crazy, and then I felt horrible for about 3 or 4 days, just like exhausted, no energy to do anything, and then I kind of overdid it a little bit earlier this past week, and I think I was bouncing too much. My body just wasn't used to all that. Like I was actually getting off the ground this time, like or getting off of the trampoline and having too much fun. And then yeah, I've been paying the price for it. So I don't know if that's what's going on with you or not. That's
I
definitely
don't
what.
know. It's weird. It's so I only did the rebounder like one day, but I did it a lot, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and then yesterday I was feeling pretty decent most of the day, but the day before that, like, okay, so I did the rebounder, and then like for 2 days after that, I woke up every morning with a really bad headache that wouldn't go away with Tylenol, which is kind of unusual for me. Um, I never have headaches anymore, and the ones I have will usually go away quickly with Tylenol. So I knew that it was like I felt like it was some kind of reaction, or maybe even like a, uh, I've had autoimmune disease symptoms, but I've never been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. So I feel like, it's like an exacerbation of that, but I don't know. It's so hard to figure out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know your body's real sensitive like mine, so it's hard when you get these kind of obscure, frustrating symptoms, and you just have to try to figure out why. And sometimes we can't figure it out.
Thanks, Alan. Hey,
So,
Nicole.
hey, Nicole. Good to see you. Awesome. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I know we missed last week because we decided to, and we didn't announce the week before that we were going to miss last week. So I don't
We
know if
just
any of you
decided
were
that day.
confused. We
We're
just
like,
decided, they decided,
why
wait
are
a
we doing
minute,
this?
it's Super Bowl Sunday. Who's going to even show
Yeah.
up? Like, even if
We
it's
yeah, I
not.
didn't even think about it being Super Bowl Sunday
Mm-mm.
I
either.
didn't either, but I think, but you know what? It did make sense. I don't know. Kim brought it up as like, well, even if it's not like during the Super Bowl, there's people getting ready
Oh
to have
yeah, and
their
going to
parties,
parties,
and
and
yeah.
and to people who are into that kind of thing, that's not me, but to people who are into that kind of thing even a little bit, it's a huge deal. So I thought,
Yeah.
well, I feel like more people are into it than aren't, so maybe we should just skip it. And, plus honestly, I just needed a break. Like, I've just felt like I've been kind of overdoing everything lately. And that might be part of why I'm feeling the way I have been. I've just kind of run myself into the ground,
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally identify with that. The day job has been just intense. I mean, not bad, but just intense and a lot of hours. And then plus, I've been trying to get this office pre-organized so that I could get my desk in here. And so,
Yeah.
just a lot of stuff. And then there were some family things that happen. So you know how it goes. It's just you're pulled in all these different directions, and eventually something has to give.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's important to take care of ourselves and maintain some balance and not overdo it. That's for sure.
Yeah. And
So,
it's weird because I've had a little bit of, I don't want to say depression because I don't really get super depressed, but just like, kind of low for a couple of days. And I told my husband, I said, I feel like it's something that I've eaten, at times we'll have little indiscretions, and I might have had a couple of those around Valentine's Day with some,
Yeah.
better than candy, like candy that's supposed to be, oh, well, this is candy that's okay. It doesn't have very much sugar. It's only 4 grams of carbs and stuff like that. So, I
Mhm.
mean, it could have been that as well. But if it was that, man, I mean, it just had such a huge effect on me. Like, I wouldn't think it would do that,
some people are extremely sensitive, and I know I had interviewed. I don't know if you guys saw my interview with Lisa from Australia. This was a couple weeks ago, but she had healed, like really healed, and got off all her medication for rheumatoid arthritis. But she has severe depression and mental health issues too. That she said that if she eats anything off of strict carnivore, like the next day, like she goes into severe depression. And so she's extra sensitive. So I can imagine that some people are kind of on the spectrum of sensitivity.
Yeah.
And, you may be a little sensitive, not quite as bad as her, but
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have noticed this happening when I eat something off
Mhm.
plan, It's
yeah,
just it's wild because like I don't want to believe it mentally that it has that strong of effect. So I'll
Yep.
try to put it on something else, but I really feel like it does.
Mhm. I believe it because, like, we had a work function and I was very good, but the type of restaurant we went to, I mean, it was hard to avoid like anything that. So I, did the least of, and plus the people, a couple of my coworkers knew the owner, and so we really had a VIP experience at this restaurant, and so like it was like all lamb meat, but it was in a wrap, and I ate that, and my stomach just does not like bread. It just doesn't.
yeah,
Mine doesn't
I
either.
didn't bloat as bad as I expected to. I think that the worst thing for me, the last time I ate pizza was like, God, close to 2 years ago. But the last time I ate pizza, oh, I bloated so bad it was terrible, and I haven't eaten pizza since at all. Well,
Yeah,
not that I
I
ate it
can't
very
either.
often, but just a once in a blue moon thing. But the last time I ate it, it was terrible. So,
wow,
yeah. So I know generally what I can eat and what I can't, and um, normally I avoid bread. I mean, like
Yeah.
bread and pasta do me in. Like I can do like a little bit of fruit or something like that, and that doesn't bother me. Um, but for whatever reason, it's the bread, man, that kills me. So I'm kind of recovering from that too, as well as from being up till 2 o'clock in the morning putting this desk together.
It's wild though how like you can rationally know like my mind's not quite right today, like I shouldn't be feeling this way. I'm but then your thoughts will just race and you'll start thinking like, well, this is stupid. Why am I even doing this? This is, maybe this is making me feel bad. I've done carnivore for 9 months and I still will have those thoughts. Well, maybe you're just like delusional. You know, maybe you just want to believe this so bad, you know? It's wild.
Yeah.
It's really wild.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
definitely. All right. Well, you guys ready to dive in?
yes.
Yeah.
All right. The chapter 12 is on viruses. It says viruses laugh at antibiotics. And the quote he put at the beginning of the chapter is by someone called Woods Hutchinson. I have not heard of that person. I don't know if you guys have, but
Nope.
No.
he says drugs are of price value when needed, but they are at best emergency measures of most temporary utility. The more effective they are in the right place, the more harmful in the wrong one.
Mm.
Yeah. So the lie he's covering in this chapter. Oh, how sweet. Oh, yeah. I love
Yeah,
Southern accents
thanks.
too.
I don't even think about it.
When I'm around my Southern relatives, I can break out into a Southern accent like that. But yes, it's true. So the lie from this chapter is the runny nose, earache, and cough won't get better unless you take a course of antibiotics. If you take an antibiotic, you will get over your runny nose, earache, or cough more quickly. And I know that, and I've seen this, I'm sure, Kim, you've seen
Whoops.
it too.
Hold on, guys. Sorry. I'm trying to do this.
Just take over.
Okay. I don't know. Oh, God.
Oh, that's cool. I mean,
Oh, here I am again. Okay, here we go. I'm so sorry. I
It's
meant to
okay.
get. See, this is the way my mind's not working right. Like I can tell I'm a little slow on the draw, right? I was trying to hit mute on the mic so my background noise is not too much.
Oh, that's funny. So yeah, so I don't know. We've seen, and I know Kim is a nurse. You've probably seen this: the over prescription of antibiotics, and the problem with that is that we've developed these resistant strains of bacteria that don't respond. I mean, the bacteria have their own way of evolving so that they can resist the antibiotics, and so we have a whole bunch of strains out there now of bacteria that won't respond to antibiotics, because it's kind of like if you give a course of antibiotics, and a lot of times people will just like not finish their course, or if it's prescribed, the wrong one prescribed, it basically doesn't kill them, it just kind of wounds them and they come back stronger.
Yeah.
But he talks a lot about how doctors have given in to the patients, or like parents of children, where they come in and they're sick and they've got like a cold or something, and they want to walk away with a prescription.
Mm-hmm.
And so these doctors he says it's almost as if doctors have been trained by demanding patients to prescribe antibiotics when they aren't needed.
Yeah, and he talked about the human nature too of wanting to do something.
Yeah.
It does go against I would think a good doctor or a decent doctor wants to help in some way, and so they feel like they have to do something. And see, I ran into this, though it's a different scenario, but it was at the dentist. I'm having some cosmetic dental work done, and I had a screw come off of one of the implants. I'm finally going to get the implant put in, but anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so after the screw came off and I went to get the screw put back in, they prescribed me antibiotics for that, and I didn't feel it or take it, but I figured, well, I take that back. I did feel this one, but I didn't take it. I was like, if I start to feel pain or inflammation or something in it, then I will, because it can be dangerous. You don't want that to get infected and affect other things. So I was just diligent about it, but I didn't take them because it carpet bombs your gut biome, and it kills the good and the bad when you take them.
Yeah, there's broad spectrum antibiotics that just kind of take on all the bacteria, and then there's more narrow spectrum antibiotics. But I know in dentistry, that's really common that they'll just kind of give you an antibiotic just because you're maybe a higher risk of developing an infection. So they want to kind of tackle it before the infection starts.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's easy for over prescribing to creep in.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to show that slide of the virus versus the bacteria.
Okay. Is that the first one?
Yeah. And again, these are screenshots. These are shots from my phone. I don't have a Kindle like version of Dr. Very's book. He doesn't offer one. So I used to be able to like get a nice screenshot from the book. So this is
That
just for
looks good to me.
Yeah, it's just the coloring is a little off, but
There we go.
this is on page 129 of his book. He wants to show you that a virus and a bacteria, although they have a couple of similarities, they are two different organisms.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and a lot of times you can have some symptoms that are similar, when you're coming down with something, because they both can cause disease. They both contain DNA and enzymes. But other than that, they're very different in their structure and their size and in how they reproduce and what they respond to. You cannot kill a virus with antibiotics. You can't. Virus, I mean, there's types of viruses that you like would take an antiviral medication for. But in general, like the common cold, it's a virus. It just has to run its course.
Mm-hmm.
What I find is that I think that a lot of times, like you were saying, that the doctors want to do something. They want to feel like they have actively done something to help you. And then also I think that it's a combination of that, and then that they have seen like the worst of the worst too. Like they've seen people come in and, they started out with a virus, but then it went into, a pneumonia, and the bacteria kind of take over and cause infection, because the virus has made the body more just hospitable to them taking over, basically.
Yeah.
So,
and I think you're right. They're maybe a little overly like careful, like afraid. So it's kind of like afraid to put a person in a position where they could get worse and end up in the hospital. But there's a balance between like realizing that prescribing just antibiotics ad hoc, there are negative consequences to that.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm sure it's challenging to kind of juggle and use discretion and discernment to figure out like, okay, who really does need an antibiotic versus who's going to get better on their own. And perhaps with some education of the patient, that may be easier, because they may come in, and some people may come in like right at the first sign of being sick, or they've maybe been not feeling good for a few days, and maybe the doctor needs to give them some at-home treatment tips and say, okay, usually they'll do this. They'll say, okay, if you don't feel better by this day, or if your symptoms are getting worse, then you need to call back and we'll escalate care. But yeah, I know there is a lot of, I'm just looking at my nieces and nephews growing up. I have one side of the family where they took their kids to the doctor for every little thing. And I swear those kids were on antibiotics all the time.
Yeah.
And, so there is definitely a concern for over prescribing. And then there's another slide. I think the next slide is related to this too. You want to scroll over. I don't know how easy this is to see, but this is basically, he summarized what the actual research on the effects of bacteria on the human body. He says that bacteria do not cause most infections, and antibiotics do not work at all on viral infections. So viral infections last for a few days, so 3 to 14 days, and then they go away. Am I the only one here?
No, you're here. I can hear you.
I'm like, oh my goodness, everybody disappeared. Yeah, it's probably good to just leave that full blown. Some bacteria can make us very sick and even kill us. And I think that's where, Kim, you were talking about. There's that knowledge that, you don't know for sure.
Well, and also I was going to add in real quick, the length of the, I think sometimes they get, viruses last a lot longer than bacterial infections. Well, I don't want to say that. Viruses can last, for a couple weeks. And sometimes I think they get scared when it's been like a couple weeks and you're still feeling really, really bad. They're thinking, oh, this may be bacterial, and I think that, a short virus doesn't get treated with antibiotics. It's the longer ones. Well,
and it doesn't mean it's not still a virus. And you're right. I mean, viral infections can take sometimes 2 to 3 weeks before.
Yeah, and they can be ugly. Like you can really feel horrible with them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It definitely you feel terrible. So yeah. So let's see. So he's mentioned some bacteria are beneficial to us, which we know a lot of bacteria are beneficial to us. I remember years ago when I took a microbiology course, the teacher said that like as far as our gut microbiome goes, like 85% of the bacteria is beneficial in our gut, and 15% are bad, but it's actually really important to have that balance between the good and the bad bacteria because it keeps your immune system, it gives it something to do, keeps your immune system strong. So bad bacteria in our system, like in our gut, aren't necessarily a bad thing. It's when they overgrow and they get to be too much that they end up making you sick. So antibiotics kill many bacteria, both bad and good. Like Carrie was saying, they can kill the good bacteria as well. Antibiotics can't kill some bacteria, and that's the ones that have developed resistance to it. Overuse of antibiotics can lead to resistant bacteria. Good bacteria can have negative health. Killing good bacteria can have negative health consequences. And that's true because that's where you get that imbalance between the good and the bad. Taking antibiotics can lead to weight gain. And then wise use of antibiotics often means not using them. So he actually says that we should only use antibiotics for a limited time, which they are usually a short course. Very few people are on long-term antibiotics, and we should avoid them at all costs in every other situation. So that leaves a lot of like judgment on the part of the doctor to determine like when to prescribe them and when not to. So anyways.
It's funny, my immunologist, whoops, I want to get back to us. Oh my gosh. Here we are. Where's the, oh my God. Okay. It's very confusing because it only shows 2 people on the screen on the little thing you're supposed to click on. So anyway, so my immunologist actually wanted me to, he said if I had any more infections, like I'd had 3 bouts of pneumonia in a 4-year period, he wanted me to be on a low dose antibiotic all the time. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And he's like, well, it might really help. And I said, no, it would probably kill me.
Yeah.
And he just looked at me like I was just crazy.
Yeah. My mom, when she was like getting towards the end of her life, she kept getting recurrent urinary tract infections. And I mean, she had Alzheimer's, and so often it's really hard with Alzheimer's that whenever they get an infection, their Alzheimer's gets worse. And it's also very difficult to tell necessarily with elderly people when they have an infection, because a lot of times the infection, most of the time the infection, the only evidence you'll see is just a change in their cognitive function. They'll seem more confused, and they won't necessarily share that they have these symptoms. So UTIs are actually one of the main causes of death in people with Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yeah.
But her urologist ended up putting her on a low dose antibiotic just for prophylaxis because she kept getting these UTIs. And it did help. It helped at least with UTIs.
Yeah.
Who knows what it did in other areas, though.
You would have to wait
my candida alone would kill me if I mean, it's trying to kill me anyway, but I'm fighting it back
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
good.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And some people are super sensitive. You can go on antibiotics and then you get this massive flare of candida.
Oh, yeah. That's me.
And that can affect your emotions.
Yeah. And I mean, that might be what I'm dealing with right now, too.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes in the beginning, you don't notice any of the symptoms of it. But you'll start to notice like little things, like my scalp will start itching a little bit. I'll get like little sores on my scalp, and it's just exhausting.
Yeah.
Being your own doctor and keeping track of all this stuff and trying to do the right things to prevent feeling sick all the time. It's exhausting.
Yeah, definitely. So he mentioned that some doctors are quick to blame their patient for the overuse of antibiotics. However, the truth is the problem is not with the antibiotic overuse. The problem was with the overprescribing of it. He did say doctors should know when antibiotics are truly called for and refuse to prescribe them whenever they aren't necessary. So that's kind of his takeaway, is that the doctors need to employ their knowledge as doctors.
I think that they should be culturing everyone and using the antibiotics appropriately.
I think so too.
I mean, it's just like the other day when I took my son to the doctor. He'd been sick for a couple of weeks, and she's writing a prescription for antibiotics. And I was like, "So you don't think this is a virus?" And she said, "Well, it may be a bit of a walking pneumonia." And I'm thinking, well, you have nothing to base this. That's literally a total guess. You have nothing to base it on whatsoever. I mean, it just, I don't know.
Right. Well, I know where I used to work before I retired, we had walk-in clinics as well as our regular clinics. And the walk-in clinics had certain things where you can just call in or do a virtual visit. And
yeah.
One of the things that they would do a virtual visit for was a suspected urinary tract infection. And they would diagnose and prescribe you a course of antibiotics with a virtual visit and no urinalysis based on the symptoms you report. Now,
that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and that happened to my daughter a couple times. Actually, she went in, but she got prescribed antibiotics and she didn't even have a urinary tract infections. And we took her back like a third time and she saw this other doctor, and he looked at the previous urinalysis and he said she didn't have UTIs. I think she's got interstitial cystitis. And the symptoms are very similar between interstitial cystitis, which is an inflammation of the lining of the bladder, versus urinary tract infection. And so it's like, yeah, you got to be careful not to, and I agree. You need to get it cultured.
Yeah.
All right. So Robin says, I agree. It's the doctor's responsibility. Most people don't know much about antibiotics at all and will take the guidance of their medical practitioner. That is so true.
And, that's what they're supposed to do, really. I mean, you can always educate yourself, but it's not a requirement that you're an educated patient, Well, that's on us, that's on the doctors, that's on the nurses to educate you.
Yeah, it's like if you take your car to the shop, for example, you aren't expected to know just how the whole, how everything works and tell them what to do. I mean, they're supposed to diagnose it and fix it. So I like to be proactive about my health, but in reality, of course, we can argue or not argue, but we can debate, what doctors tell us to do, like what's discussed in this book. But really, a patient is not out of bounds expecting the doctor to know what they're doing, because anybody else that you get service from like that, whether it's fixing a computer or whatever, you don't have to know the workings of a computer to have somebody come in and fix it.
Well, and I know that
I do think that'll.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just know with a lot of doctors that I've experienced working with is when patients come in and say they have a set of symptoms, often they'll diagnose it based on what is the prevalent illness going around.
Mhm.
and not necessarily run the tests. They'll be
Mhm.
like, "Oh yeah, well, we're seeing a whole bunch of people with this particular set of symptoms. Then they all have this particular illness, and so we're going to just go ahead and treat you the way we're treating the masses." And I think that's one thing that's very easy for them to kind of get away with, and it sounds rational to patients. I personally don't think that that's the right way to treat patients, because it's prescribing medication without actually having any quantifiable evidence of what they have.
Yeah.
Hi, Renee.
But I did want to share kind of one of the tricks that I use, and if you want to bring up that slide of the betadine, and this works. So the point of entry, like when you're dealing with like especially these respiratory infections, the point of it is the one before that with the betadine. That the one before that. Oh no, maybe the one after that. Sorry, I put them out of order. So I use this. It's betadine throat gargle. And so the point of entry, especially when we're talking about like the common cold and COVID and all these respiratory viruses and stuff that are out there, the point of entry is your mucosa, your nose and your throat. And what I've started doing, I've like read a study. This was probably late 2020. I read a study because they were doing a lot of studies about COVID, and that they said that like the people who would use this or a mouthwash or something that antiseptic were like had 85% better chances of not developing any serious disease. And so I started using this. Like if I was out someplace and there were a lot of people coughing and everything, I would go home and I would use the throat gargle, like 30 seconds of the throat gargle, and then you dilute it to half strength and take a Q-tip and swab up your nostrils like as high as you can.
We do that on every patient now,
Yeah,
pretty
I
much.
cannot tell you
They do the swabs, the
I
betadine
can't tell you
swabs.
how many times I felt like I was starting to come down with something, and I did this, and it just nipped it right in the butt. It's just
So
basically
I do that with my Navage. It's basically an I don't want to say electronic, but it's like a battery powered neti pot.
yeah.
And so especially if I'm around anybody who's coughing and, I have any suspicion of being exposed to anything at all, I'll come home and use my neti pot, and it takes, probably a couple minutes, and then that's that. And
And that's even better than just the swab because it gets it way up in there.
yeah, and it brings it all out. It's a continuous flush of salt water basically. But the thing about me using any antiseptic or mouthwash, I stay far away from any mouthwash, because I need my bacteria in my mouth to be what it's supposed to be.
Right. This is not intended for daily use.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is I
With
only do this if I feel
being
something coming on.
being prone to yeast, it could really cause me a bad episode of like thrush or something.
Yeah. 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 So the neti pot is a really good option for people who are real sensitive like Kim. I don't have any issues with this because I rarely do it. I only do it occasionally. But yeah, you don't want to be constantly disrupting the microbiome of your nose and your mouth either. Just like you don't want to do that with your gut. But yeah, I have my daughter brings home all sorts of stuff. She's a children's pastor and she's always around kids, and she brings home everything out there. And
Oh gosh.
yeah, and so if I feel like I'm coming down with something, I do that, and it just takes care of it. So, but something that you
didn't know. I never thought of that. Thank you for sharing that, Lynn.
Yeah, well, I wanted to share that because it's like we need to have we need to have some tools for how we can help ourselves at home.
Yeah.
So whatever.
And what Robin is saying here, one of the reasons why we do this, especially if you're coming in for a surgery, is because one of the most common causes of, hospital acquired pneumonia is anything that they put in you, any tube or anything that's invasive, like say the tube to be intubated with during your surgery, they put you on the ventilator. Anything that's in your mouth, they're basically shoving it down into your lungs. So, that could set you up developing pneumonia.
Yeah.
So yeah, we do that with pretty much every patient now.
Yeah. Yeah. So he says that make sure your doctor doesn't give you an antibiotic for a viral infection. The best way to make sure your doctor doesn't give you an antibiotic for a viral infection is to not go to the doctor when you have a runny nose, scratchy throat, or a cough. So viruses always cause these symptoms. There's no magic pill to make them go away sooner. And he does talk about probiotics, using probiotics. And then he mentions too, if you go to your doctor with a runny nose, cough, or a low-grade fever, you do not need antibiotics. So he didn't define what a low-grade fever is. So that's why I included that other slide, because I wanted to make sure that it was clear what's considered a low-grade fever. And this was just copied off of the Harvard medical website. So these are the actual technical definitions of a low-grade fever, a moderate-grade fever, or a high-grade fever.
And we need to add to this as well that, a fever is your body's natural response to an invader, and it's actually a beneficial thing. It's attempting to fight it and kill it.
Right.
And I think we're way too quick to treat a fever, like even a low grade or a moderate grade fever. If it was high grade, I would definitely treat it just for comfort measures, and just getting up there into a dangerous level. But a moderate grade to low grade fever, I'll just ride it out if I can, because it really helps to heal your body.
And you don't want to get into the high grade realm without treating. I mean, this is my opinion, but you need to make sure if it gets too high, you need to be taking the Tylenol. But if your high grade fever is not responding to Tylenol and it's sustaining, that's when you need to get to see your doctor.
Or ibuprofen, because if it doesn't respond to one, it will usually respond to the other.
Yeah.
I've noticed that with my kids.
Yeah, you can take ibuprofen, you can take Tylenol. Sometimes you can alternate between the two. I've had done that with my kids when they were growing up. I'd give them Tylenol, and then, midway through their Tylenol doses, I'd give them some ibuprofen. And those are ibuprofen and Tylenol are two completely separate classes of medications, and they can be both taken. But if you get to be, if you have a sustained high grade fever, like really high, like 105, you probably know this better than I do, Kim, because I didn't work with people with that high grade fevers. But you can your organs start to malfunction, and that you can go into organ failure. So you
can have brain damage.
Correct.
Above about 105.
105 is about the cutoff there. Yeah. So I don't think he's recommending you mess with high fevers and ride out a high fever. No, you don't. You need to treat a high fever. But Kim's right. When you have a low grade fever, let your body do what it's going to do. It's fighting your illness. So anyways, and take probiotics. Probiotics are good. So anyways, to me, that was a loaded chapter because
yeah.
I mean, I've dealt with enough as a nurse of people who are struggling and have had to refer people to an infectious disease specialist because they are not responding to treatment. And, I've dealt with resistant bacteria and, in the medical community, we know this. I mean, it's talked about. We know that there's overprescription of antibiotics. So I
remember a few years ago that there was it was like well publicized. It seemed like there was a lot of discussion like in media and stuff about overprescribing and stuff, but it kind of course, now granted, I don't partake of media much anymore, so I don't know what they talk about now, but it does seem though, like in just general conversation, that doesn't really come up anymore. Like, have y'all found that too, that people don't really talk about it that much now? I mean, it doesn't seem like they do.
I mean, the media will grab stuff and run with it, and it's just it's just bizarre. Like this has been going on for, I mean, ever, you know, and we've known for the longest time since I was a new nurse, at least. I mean, I'm sure way longer before that, you know, more discretion needs to be taken about prescribing antibiotics. But I think part of the problem is the doctor's not with you. All they're relying on is what you're telling them. So I think some of them are scared to death that you're going to leave there and get, you know, get really, really sick with some kind of bacterial thing that they have missed. And, you know, it's easier for them to just protect you and them because they're not going to be with you. You know, I don't know. I think that's human nature.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somehow you got to figure out how to get around that, and so that the doctors will feel more comfortable providing the patient with education and follow-up steps, and not just send them home.
And for people to, I think that they should provide people with education that, just like Dr. Berry said, that when you have a scratchy throat, a cough, you know, runny nose, that is a virus. I mean, as crazy as it is, even as a nurse, I don't think I've ever had anybody say that. Like,
I haven't either.
I grew to know that, yes, but you know, it's something that, like, why is there not more common sense in this world? You know, everything we want everything to be so supported by all these big studies and everything, but then the basic stuff just gets completely missed.
Yeah, and you know, and we are not exactly boosting up our immune health with our diet either.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the diet can definitely help you get through illnesses faster and avoid illnesses. You work on your immune system, and you know, and if you have bacteria love sugar.
Yeah.
It's like I used to, if my kids would get sick, I would not let them have juice. I wouldn't let them have anything with sugar in it at all. Well, until they were better. And of course, then I was eating the standard American diet. And I even, you know, with the crap diet I was eating, I still didn't feed them anything with sugar when they were sick.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that was a long time on chapter 12, but it was kind of a packed chapter. The next 3 chapters are pretty short. So you guys ready to move to chapter 13?
Yeah. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. This one's about salt. And the quote is from some James Lendell Basford. We're in the age of MD, medical darkness, which seeks legislative protection from the light. That's an interesting quote. So the lie is increasing salt increases your risk of having high blood pressure, which increases your risk for heart attack and stroke. You should eat a low salt diet as much as possible to prevent heart disease.
Yeah. And
so unsurprisingly, there's no evidence to support that.
Yeah, there's not.
I still want to read the Salt Fix, by the way. I haven't read that.
Yes, I want to read that too. I haven't read it either.
Yeah, I need to find out. So I had my tilt table test last week for, you know, and saw a cardiologist for, you know, to be tested for dysautonomia because I had like orthostatic intolerance, which is really common with mast cell disease. And so I had my tilt table test, and it was, and it was actually kind of inconsistent with the findings from the cardiologist, because the cardiologist actually diagnosed me with orthostatic intolerance because he saw the blood pressure drop and the tilt. So the tilt table tested out. No, it was a negative test. You had one little borderline finding, but it wasn't significant. And so I sent it back to my cardiologist and asked him, what's your opinion? Because this is inconsistent. And I think that he said, you still have orthostatic intolerance. These tilt table tests are not always very reliable. And he said, and you've been utilizing salt. And I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder if that's why, because they tell me beforehand to be MPO, like for 2 hours ahead of time, but they tell me like to hold off, like I had to hold my antihistamines, no caffeine, but they didn't say no electrolytes. And I had one of these full of my element that morning. So I'm wondering if I kind of messed up the results of my test, because I did have symptoms during the test. I mean, I was getting very, very warm and like really hot. The heat was started rising, and I was feeling nauseated. My vision was starting to get blurry. I didn't pass out, but salt is interesting for me because I need to figure out, like the cardiologist says, you need to not restrict salt, but he didn't tell me how much I should be taking. But you know,
and anecdotally, I can say that salt definitely does not make your blood pressure go up. And as a matter of fact, mine is lower than it's ever been in my life. I've had a couple of routine doctor's appointments. Well, actually, three since I've been carnivore. It was just to follow up on other stuff. But, and at all of them, the first reading was below 120/80 on all of them. And I used to have white coat syndrome where, like, they would take it, they just knew. And so they would just wait and take it again, and sometimes a third time, before it went back down. And now the first time, one and done.
yeah.
So,
Wow.
I mean, it's fabulous. The last time I went was last week for a follow up, and it was 170. I'm sorry, 117/77.
Beautiful.
And that's at the doctor's office.
Yeah.
First try.
Well, I know
I
you
was
used to
like,
have the white coat syndrome, so that's amazing.
yeah. So it's
Lynn
even lower. Like when I take it, I have a blood pressure cuff, and I don't take it every single day, but I'll just sometimes do what I call a spot check. I'll just reach and get it, and I make sure that I've done like what Dr. Berry says in his video about sitting, making sure that I'm not talking or involved in something.
Yeah.
I am sitting up, but I mean it's not like I'm laying down because that'd be cheating, but. But anyway, and it's even lower than that when I take it myself just here. So, I mean, it's not too low, but I mean, it used to run low, oddly enough. My mom, I remember we used to, like when we were out running errands and stuff, we'd stop and she always, for some reason, wanted to do the blood pressure machine.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and she would say, "Are you alive?" Because my blood pressure used to run really low. I didn't feel bad, but it just used to really run low. And now I'm back to that. So it's incredible. And I mean, that was like when I was in my 20s. So, and I'm almost 58 now. So, I mean, it's awesome.
That's great. I know my blood pressure's kind of become all over the board ever since I've been dealing with the autonomic dysfunction. But the cardiologist said there's, you don't treat it because it's not, it's not a cardiac issue. He said it's a neurological issue. So mine can be up and down and all over the place. So this is a new thing for me. So I'm just starting to dig into what can I do to help improve this situation, because it's annoying when you feel like you're going to pass out just by standing and talking to somebody.
Yeah.
But I probably have to increase my sodium intake, I'm assuming. So, but yeah, so he said that there have been studies, but he said it's clear the conclusions were stretched to the limits of believability, which seems like that's the common theme with all these nutritional studies. So his comments,
and yet we put so much faith in them.
I know we do
as a society.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most people don't necessarily understand what a really truly good scientific study entails, and it's just like impossible to get a good nutritional study because you just can't control all the variables.
Well, and there are also two parts to science. One is the hypothesis, and number two is testing the hypothesis. And what it is we've got the hypothesis. So they do these observational studies to gain the hypothesis, but then it doesn't progress any further. Or if it does, data is manipulated so bad, or the variables aren't clear, or things are still kind of muddled. It's kind of like when you include, I don't know, like if somebody's, just as an example, like if somebody eats meat, but they eat a burger, and so you've got the carbs and the protein and fat, for example. So there's still things that aren't really, or they'll say it's a low carb diet, but it's like 150 grams of carbs, and it's like, what universe
Right.
had a low carb diet? It's not.
Right.
It might be lower than what a lot of people eat, but
Or a lot of these studies where they talk about like a high protein diet, high meat based diet. A lot of the proteins are like lunch meats and a lot of processed meats and stuff. And yeah, so yeah, but he does say that all mammals crave salt and will travel to impressive distances to enjoy it. So it's like it's part of our genetic makeup to need salt. And he does talk about how unless you have kidney disease, our kidneys are very, very well equipped to regulate our electrolytes inside of our bodies. So, if you get too much salt, your kidneys are going to have you urinating, and they can retain the sodium. So he emphasizes not being worried about eating too much salt unless you have kidney disease, and then you need to work with your nephrologist.
Or
So,
COPD. I mean, not COPD, CHF.
CHF.
Congestive heart failure.
Yeah, congestive heart failure. Yes.
Which even in congestive heart failure, it's not as all or nothing as we used to believe. We used to think that if they had CHF, they can't have any salt. But now I think there's a little bit more information on it. I would have to look into it a little deeper, but I do remember hearing Dr. Berry talking about that.
And no salt is dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. That's literally what our blood is made of, aside of the red blood cells and some other stuff in there. It's salt water. That's what we're made out of. So why would we not need that to replenish?
Yeah,
it
that's
doesn't make any
always
sense.
something that never made any sense to me either. Because like if you've ever like tasted blood for whatever reason, I mean, it's salty.
Okay, what are you doing, Gary?
Cut myself and lick it.
I'm a vampire. You found
Yeah,
I
when
gave
I was
myself
a kid.
away. I gave myself away. But it's salty. And so it's like it never really made sense to me that salt would be harmful to us.
Yeah.
Because and the reason I say that is because like Dr. Perry says in here, it's like some of them even recommend like no salt. Like or the lower your intake, the better it is for your heart. And it's like and for your blood pressure. And it's like it doesn't make sense to me that you would give up something that's so vital and that's like obviously a part of you. I don't know. It just
Yeah.
Well,
so I just kind of looked up just so I can make sure I got it right. So you can have too much salt. It's called hyponatremia. And then
hypernatremia.
I'm sorry,
said
too
much?
Salt. Too little. Sorry, too little.
Okay.
I mean, you can have too little salt. So you can have nausea and vomiting are the earliest signs that your salt levels are too low. Then you can have headache, lethargy. I forget what obtundation means. Do you know what that means, Kim?
Obtunded, where you're just like, duh, like.
Yeah, I love these
not
technical words. And then if it gets really low, you can have seizures, coma, and respiratory arrest. And then you can have cerebral edema, which is the swelling of the brain, which is related to rapid decline of serum plasma, like sodium. So so it's not like too little salt is of no consequence. You need salt. And of course, again, your kidneys regulate. So like if you're not getting enough salt, it's not like you're going to instantly all of a sudden be in crisis, because your kidneys will then retain and hold on to what you have. But yeah.
So obtunded, just so you guys know, it's a decreased interest in the environment, slower than normal reactivity to stimulation, and tends to sleep more than normal with drowsiness in between sleep states. It's not like stupor or coma. It's a little less than that, but So a lethargic patient will be sleepy but awaken easily to verbal stimuli or prodding. The obtunded patient is a higher level of severity and will need a repeated stimuli to awaken.
Oh,
So
Yeah. Yeah, because it does list lethargy separate from obtundation. So it's not just lethargy.
that's
So
one of the choices when we describe our patients, neurological status.
yeah.
It's one of the ones I almost never use. But
Yeah. It's
I
been
would
so many
usually
years
like
since I've been
freehand something
in the
in.
hospital. Yeah, I haven't worked in the hospital since like 2015. So I
Well,
like
but
all
it
the
didn't say,
terminology I forget.
but it didn't say obtunded. It said obtund. What did it say? Like
It
obtundation?
said obtundation.
Yeah. Like I understand that word could be from obtunded, but I've never heard it said that
I've
way.
never heard
So,
that either. So it's like, I don't know what this means. But yeah, the root is obtunded. But anyways, I mean, the takeaway is that, if the doctor tells you no salt, I'd seriously be questioning that doctor, honestly.
yeah.
Yeah. So, so yeah, he does mention some research that was done, and there was actually the one that was really interesting was this 2006 study that was published in the American Journal of Medicine. They recorded the salt intake of more than 70 million Americans and compared it to their risk of dying from heart disease over a 14-year period. The study found that the more sodium people ate, the less likely they were to die from heart disease.
so is this
Yeah.
self-reported data? See, this is the thing, though. That I mean, did they actually? How do they know how much salt these people ate?
I don't know. I didn't read the D. I didn't look up the
So
study.
that's the only thing. I mean, I just think that there's probably not.
It was probably self-reported, which of course we know can be inaccurate,
Yeah.
but
Well,
still, I mean,
I
it was
guess what
70
at the very least, it's saying that there are just as many studies saying that it doesn't matter as it is the ones where they teased out some data.
You figure this is probably a retrospective study because you know that they're not actually signing up 70 million Americans into a clinical trial. So
Exactly.
because they said that they looked at the salt intake of more than 70 million Americans. So it must be based on medical records and self-reported salt intake.
Which
So
is highly unreliable.
highly unreliable, but still interesting. The people who are self-reporting that they eat a lot of salt or they intake a lot of salt, to me would be someone who's maybe not purposely restricting salt. Maybe that's what they looked at, because I know that usually if people are purposely restricting salt, keeping it under 2 grams a day, that's usually documented somewhere in their medical records.
But
So
most
maybe,
people lie too.
well, oh yeah, they lie about
You
that
know.
as well. Oh yeah, I can't tell you how many people I've dealt with. So many people who are at end-stage liver disease, working in hepatology, and I can't tell you how many times I talk to. Often I was talking to family members because most of these people don't manage their own diets because they're too sick. But I remember talking to family members that were saying, "Oh yeah, I'm really watching their sodium intake, keeping it under 2 grams." And I'd ask them, "So what exactly are they eating?" And I can't tell you how
That's
many
why they're so sick, and they
soup.
can't take care of themselves
So many
because
times.
their
Oh,
family members not giving them any salt.
I'm feeding them soup. Like, now, do you realize how much sodium is in soup? So people don't know. I mean, they don't realize it. And then
Or they think about adding salt. They don't
they
realize
think
how
it
much.
only means adding
Yeah.
the salt shaker. Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, people with end-stage liver disease, need to keep their sodium lower. But yeah, there's definitely a lack of knowledge about how to track your sodium. So, all right.
Yeah,
So he basically says go to town with sodium if you have healthy kidneys. Although he says he doesn't really like sodium himself or salt, which I thought was interesting. I
I
love
think his taste changed because now he talks about eating more salt. So
See, I read that as wasn't really somebody who loved the taste of salt, but like he just does it to taste,
Uses it.
and
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
is not afraid of it, kind of thing.
Yeah. I've learned that since I started the carnivore diet, I needed to be super purposeful with how much salt I add because, a lot of us, when we do the standard American diet, a lot of our sodium intake comes from packaged processed foods. And then you switch to just eating meat, and you don't get salt naturally just from eating meat. You got to add it to your meat. And so I've had to make sure I'm adding plenty. And and I use Element to get some extra electrolytes.
Yeah, I add Redmond's garlic salt. Man, I love that stuff, and I add that to my burger patties every time I eat them. Oh, it's delicious.
Interesting. All right. So chapter 14 is about calories, which we covered this with Dr. Fung's book. That not all calories are created equal, and the quote is from George Tennyson Prentice, which says, "What some call health, if purchased by perpetual anxiety about diet, is much better than tedious disease." And the lie is that a calorie is a calorie. Whether the source is birthday cake or broccoli, you can eat whatever you want as long as you limit your total calorie intake. You will be slender and healthy by counting calories because all calories are the same. If you want to lose weight, you should burn more calories than you eat.
And even little kids know that that's not true. I mean, everybody, it's like it instinctively that not that they're thinking, not that little kids are thinking in terms of calories, but I mean, it's like sweets are different from, say, meat and vegetables.
I mean, some things are just so stupid, like
Yeah.
you could never believe it.
But
And
I
think
remember
most
being
of us
told
have never.
that.
Yeah, I'm sure we've been told that, but most of us have never actually believed that because it just sounds so stupid. Like there's so many things in life that I kind of knew weren't true. It like all the kids that come in with the bottle rot from going to sleep with milk. I'm like, that's not from milk.
No.
And I know this because, well, it's just the common sense of it, first of all, but also, I've had 4 babies and they've all went to sleep with milk, and none of them have ever had I mean, and that's an anecdotal thing, but it's just common sense. Like these people are giving their kids like Mountain Dew in their bottle and stuff. All your teeth don't rot out of your head because of milk. Like it's just.
My daughter just came in to get the dog. So, yeah. Well, I thought it was one thing that was interesting that he brought up that Dr. Fung didn't talk about was that when how they determine how many calories is in a food is by actually burning the food and determining the energy output from actually burning it. And one point he brings up is that our bodies are not a furnace. Our bodies, this is a processed food differently. They don't burn it. We digest it and we absorb it. And so his whole premise is you can't even compare like a food that's being burned and releasing energy versus how our body takes food, digests it, breaks it down, and then utilizes it to create energy. It's a totally different system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like he always says, well, he and others always say, your body's not a bomb calorimeter. That's what that device is where they burn and they figure out how many calories. And it was never meant for that. Like it was never meant to help people lose weight. It was never meant for that.
Terminology too. They say like, I'm burning
burning calories.
I gotta go burn this off. Like if they ate a piece of cake or something and they go for a long walk or go work out or something. Yeah, I've got to burn that cake off. People, it's just a common terminology that we all use to talk about, I guess, expending energy, but in reality, it's totally inaccurate. But it's because of this theory.
Yeah, it is. And is it even rational to think that how quickly or how efficiently one person converts the food into energy would be the same from person to person. I mean, when you talk about the calories, they're assuming that each of our body processes it exactly the same way
Mm-hmm.
and converts it into energy at the exact same rate and pace and efficiency. And I don't think that's legitimate at all. Each of us has a different system, and some of us are very efficient at converting food into energy, and others aren't. Others aren't absorbing things very well. And I just think
And we're
that
not a closed system.
no, we're not a close system. I think it's a completely useless thing to even consider when it comes to food. And tracking calories is like, okay, so big deal. This is how much energy the food burned when in a controlled environment. It means nothing to how my body is going to utilize the fuel from this food.
Mm-hmm.
I may not be utilizing it hardly at all. If my gut is in bad condition, I'm not. Yeah, I mean,
or like in this case where you're incinerating Cheerios. If I eat Cheerios, my gut will be so inflamed it won't be able to utilize any nutrition.
oh yeah,
Right.
get to incinerate Cheerios to measure its heat energy in a bomb
So,
calorimeter in college chemistry classes. Yeah, so you get to measure it, but it's not very helpful if it's completely meaningless to translate it over to the actual human body.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
love that
it's
name,
funny
by the way, Darth Carnivore.
I know,
I
I love
know.
it too.
What a fabulous name.
But like my son, I remember he was like, I don't know, it was right before he graduated from high school. He was maybe 17. But I remember, I think he was just there when I was talking about diet. And he actually said, he's an engineer by trade now, but I mean, he actually said back then, he's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Our bodies aren't closed systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's using energy as fuel for a closed system, not for the human. And he knew this at 17. Now, granted, I mean, he was a nerd. He still is. He's a
Nerds
nerd.
are the best.
He takes
I'm a
after his
nerd.
mother.
I'm a
You know,
nerd.
And they didn't have, I mean, a closed system wouldn't have all the hormones, all of the outputs from the external environment, factoring in, how much effort and exercise you're putting out. I mean, there's so many different things that go into that, and just also the efficiency of your equipment that you're working with. It may be very damaged after many years of abusing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So Renee talked about putting a big red heart on the cereal box for further proof. Do you remember, was it in
Yeah.
Dr. Fung's book that we read that they actually purchased those hearts?
yes, they did.
Like $7,000, and you could get
Yeah.
a few
And
of them or something.
Yeah, and you get the rights to put that heart on your product,
my
and then you
God.
get a volume. And manufacturers get a volume discount if they
Yeah,
put it
those
on.
are-
Yeah, so it has absolutely no meaning at all. It just means that the manufacturer has purchased the rights to put that heart on their product and call it heart healthy.
It's
And
just so disgusting. It's just all so disgusting. Like
unbelievable.
And of
the
course,
more
they've
you
got
learn,
Tufts.
it just
They've got Tufts saying that Cheerios and Cocoa Puffs and stuff like that are healthier than bacon and eggs. So there you go.
Right.
Think about that
Right.
too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was shocked. I remember when we were reading his book and we talked about that. I was just like blown away because I didn't know that. I thought that if it said heart healthy, they had to meet certain criteria, but they don't. They just have to fork out $7,000. Unbelievable.
Dog turds are heart healthy, I guess.
So did you want to show the graphic about the obesity? Because that was one, yeah. So he has actually 3 of these maps, but he looked at, so the dark blue is, see, these are obesity rates in the United States over the decades. So the dark blue is below 20%. 1995, the entire country was below 20% in the obesity rate.
I didn't realize it was so recent.
I didn't either.
Well, but in reality, that's 29 years ago. It's just it's
our age.
Yeah, our time
That's
challenge
I
shrank.
still would have put it back to like the 70s or something if I had to
Oh,
guess, you know.
I would have too, because there wasn't it like in the 70s that we started seeing a lot of changes. Or maybe it was in the early 80s, wasn't
no,
it?
it was like the mid 80s.
That the dietary guidelines changed.
They changed
So
in 1980. Yeah, the official
yeah,
guidelines came out in 1980. So a few years, about 3 or 4 years after that, is when things started to change. But
yeah.
I guess it took a little time for it to percolate.
Well, and a lot of times things take a generation,
Yeah.
right? Before you really see the impact. But this was 2017. And well, go back to the other one, because I wanted to look at the other one for 2005. So there were still four states that were below 20%. And there were only, I think those 3 states are not even the highest over 35. I think those 3 states that are red are the lighter red, over 30%. So that was in 2005. So it was getting worse, obviously. Most of the country was great, between 20 and 25%. The South was a little bit more. And then we can look at 2017, and it's astonishing how things have changed. No more dark blue states at all. And we actually have some states in the South that are in that greater than 35% range.
Mhm.
Do you guys see your states? Are you guys at the greater than 30%?
Ours is Tennessee is greater than 30.
Yeah. Me here in Washington, it looks like we're greater than 25. Colorado looks like they're doing the best. Not great, but they're doing the best. What are they doing in Colorado?
They're all vegans.
I don't know. There's tons of vegans here in Washington too.
Well, yeah, that's true. I don't know.
Well,
Maybe
You know what it is? I was talking and I was like, she keeps talking over me. And I was muted.
oh,
Okay. I said, first of all, I said, well, Tennessee and Kentucky are like little redneck cousins. We're right in there over 30% together, as
yeah,
always. But Colorado, I actually read this the other day and I sent it to my sister-in-law because she lives in Colorado. And what it is, let's see here if I can find what it is it's due to the what do you call it, when the altitude.
I was wondering what to do with the elevation.
Yeah, so let's see here if I can find. Okay, so I just learned that people who live in Colorado have the lowest incidence of obesity, not because of the outdoor culture like they like to claim, but because of the altitude and thus the most mitochondria. So they have more mitochondria because of the altitude. And since mitochondrial dysfunction is the root of most modern diseases, that's why. The lower oxygen tension is an inducer of mitochondrial biogenesis. So they have lower oxygen tension, and that means they make more mitochondria. So, and this is off per Dr. Robert Lustig. It was one of his videos I was listening to.
Interesting. Have either of you been to Colorado?
I have not. My sister-in-law lives in Denver. I need to go.
Oh my gosh. I was in Colorado, and I swear, and I mean, in Washington, everything is on a hill. So I'm used to climbing, like walking uphill. But in Colorado, holy cow, out of breath so easily because it's such high elevation. And I was really surprised too. I was there in March of 2020. So it wasn't like it was real hot or anything, but I could not believe how thirsty I was. I was drinking like gallons of water just to try to stay hydrated. So like there is something remarkably different with Colorado.
Renee says smoking weed.
Oh, there's tons of people in Washington State smoking weed too. So we got pot shops all over the place.
And Nevada and in California.
Yep. Oh yeah. No, we got pot shops like on every corner. Not every corner, but we got a ton of pot shops. So.
She said you can't breathe long enough to go eat.
Maybe that's it.
They're gasping. They're like,
oh,
Mm.
But anyways, but the overall, we're doing terrible as a country. Yeah. So so we're screwing up our insulin metabolism, and by the foods that we're eating is basically his thing. So, all right. We got one more chapter. This one was like super, super short, so we could probably go through this really fast.
All right.
So, chapter 15, it says, does too much calcium cause kidney stones? And he quotes Voltaire at the beginning, the art of medicine consists of amusing the patient while nature cures the disease. That was funny. And then, so the lie says eating or drinking too much calcium can lead to kidney stones. Also, if you've had a kidney stone, you should decrease your calcium intake so you don't get another. And he said that is the lie. We don't need to go into. He talks about how painful they are.
And they are. I had one, let's see, 11 years ago, and they are more painful than childbirth. He's right. It was agonizing. It was
I haven't had
awful.
a kidney stone. My brother's had kidney stones, and I was with him when he was actually had one that he was passing, and he was like sweating and pale, and we were actually in a hospital waiting room to go see our mother, and he would not let me take him down to the ER. We were in the hospital.
Oh, wow.
So, and he ended up needing to go anyways. So, but yeah, so he basically said that there is no research showing that high calcium foods in your diet increase your risk of a kidney stone. So he said there's some mediocre research showing a possible relationship between taking large doses of calcium supplements and developing kidney stones, but the jury is out on this theory until someone performs a meaningful study. He said that calcium is vital to building bone and hundreds of other bodily functions, so it stands to reason that you should make sure you're getting plenty of it. And calcium levels in the blood and urine are tightly controlled by the body's mechanism. So it's kind of a challenge, kind of like with the sodium. Your body regulates the calcium.
Mm-hmm.
So he says it's not as simple as just eating too much will cause your body to produce stones. Yeah.
And I was thinking that the oxalates binding with the calcium were more of a cause than just the calcium itself.
Yeah, I know in Sally Norton's book, she does talk about oxalates and kidney stones. So,
well, there are oxalate stones. There's different types of kidney
Okay.
stones. So I really don't know what kind mine was because I didn't catch it. They always want you to try to catch it. They give you a little hat and stuff. And I'm just going to admit that I was a bad girl and didn't hold that down there every time I went to the bathroom. I didn't do it. So I don't know what it was.
Okay. Well, he
they
talks about vitamin D because he says that it's very popular especially among women, to take a calcium supplement. And he said, although this is probably unnecessary and probably didn't increase their bone strength, we also didn't see a sudden uptick in kidney stones in women. So I think that if we had all these women starting to take calcium supplements for bone health, we would have seen an uptick in kidney stones if there was a relationship. And we did not see that. And he did say that the nutrient most women are deficient in that would likely, increase your bone strength is vitamin D. So he did talk about looking into vitamin D and doing some research on vitamin D and making sure you're checking your levels. And he says, if your doctor tells you to decrease your calcium intake to keep you from making kidney stones, you should respectfully tell him you would like a copy of the research upon which he's basing his advice. So he also said drinking milk isn't necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so that kind of
Well,
wraps
because
it.
it's fortified with vitamin D. It doesn't even, and I don't know if it's like the vitamin D that we need. I mean, there's calcium in it, but it's also fortified with vitamin D, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And um, when anything is fortified, we all know what that means. They add it in there, like it's taken out if it's there, and then they add it back. I guess so they know how much is in there. I don't really know why they like. I've heard that when they fortify something, like if there's something that's in there, they take it out, like a nutrient or whatever, but then they put it back in. Like I guess
Well, a
they
lot of
say
times with processed foods, just the processing itself takes away nutrients, and so then they add it back.
yeah.
So okay, so Darth Carnivore says, I've heard from Dr. Seawis the body produces oxalates endogenously. I'm not clear how these would turn into calcium oxalate kidney stones. Oh, interesting. I love Dr.
Okay,
Seawis.
so I'm reading right now from John Hopkins. Oxalate and calcium bind together in the intestine and leave the body together in the stool. If there's not enough calcium, then the extra oxalate will have nothing in the intestine to bind to, so it will be absorbed into the bloodstream and end up in the urine, where it will form a calcium oxalate stone.
Okay, interesting.
Hmm.
Okay, so that sounds like we definitely need to make sure we're getting enough calcium.
Yeah, I just think that maybe, of course, getting your nutrients as naturally as possible is like the best way to do it. I think that a lot of times, like with supplements, people over supplement sometimes.
And I've
Which
also heard that it could cause problems with your, like problems with blockages and vessels and stuff if you are just taking like large amounts of calcium. So I'm,
yeah, and I
I
thought
don't
that
know.
when they tell you to take K2, like everybody, like even Dr. Berry advises the K2, like D3 and K2, and I was under the impression, and I could be under the wrong impression, that that was done to keep the calcium from going where it doesn't need to go. Have y'all heard that, or did y'all
Well, I mean,
understand that? Or
I have heard that, but I'm not very well read on that, admittedly.
well, and I mean, and potassium and sodium and calcium all kind of worked together. And so, yeah, I haven't dug into it too much.
I haven't either. I just do take the D3 and K2. I've slacked off on the D3 though because I got my levels taken and it was like 125 or something. My doctor was like, "Stop
Yeah,
taking
I know you mentioned that last time. So how much are you taking now?
I just take 5,000 units like twice. I mean, I'm sorry, 10,000 units twice a week now. I was taking 10,000
Okay.
units a day, but I
Okay.
didn't want to stop completely because I don't get even in the summer. I'm not out in the sun enough to get the vitamin D that I need.
Yeah. I'm
So,
trying to, when the sun is out, I'm trying to spend more time um out in the sun and you know get as much skin exposure to it as possible. Just, I know early morning is a really good time because you're not necessarily going to get burned, and if you can go out and get as much skin exposure for maybe 15 minutes or so, that's supposed to be really good for getting your vitamin D levels up. So, but Mike says bathing your system in insulin causes all kinds of nasty things. I think that's really, yeah, it
Yeah.
seems a common thing is just insulin and is, yeah,
I
kind of
think
the
the best thing to do is to get your, calcium and your potassium and everything from like actual food, you know?
I think so too.
sardines,
Yeah,
sardines,
your sardines, yeah. So, all
Kim.
right. Awesome. So we've got, let's see how much, so we've got chapters. You want to do 4 again, or?
Sure.
How
I mean,
many
I'm
are
good.
left? I don't even know.
Let
Let's
me
see.
see how many chapters we have total here.
Because my chapters on the audiobook are like
Oh, they're all
mislabeled.
messed up. Yeah, I noticed that too.
There's 27 of them plus an epilogue.
And there's
Oh,
a
let's
there's a short epilogue. Yeah. So we still have plenty of time to go. So we could do 16, 17, 18, and 19. That'd be 4 chapters.
Yeah.
Okay.
for next time.
All right.
Sounds great.
And all right, seems like we got plenty to talk about when we do 4.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Alrighty.
So that was
Well, guys, thanks for joining us. And if you want to come over and see us on our channels, I'm at Nurse Kimberly Lane, Lynn's at Midlife Carnivore, and Carrie is at My Meatomorphosis with an O in the middle. And we'd be glad to have you.
yeah,
So
definitely.
thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you,
All right,
everybody.
bye everybody. Thanks for
Bye,
coming.
guys. Thank you.